a sweet spot at the moment. I mean, if you look at the strength of the Indian economy and the growth in the economy, you look at the share of the sports economy, the Indian sports economy that cricket attracts, it's unrivaled by any sport in any other country around the world. So then you also look at the viewing habits of people, and sport is one of the everlasting appointments to view. So you watch it live or else you miss out. And the other thing is in the Indian commercial markets, there's a really healthy competition for cricket's premium rights. And I think you've seen over the last 6 to 8 months, the result with the IPL, the ICC rights, the Women's Premier League rights just a couple of weeks ago. I think cricket's popularity in India is growing and growing, and the BCCI has done a terrific job in promoting the game here. The teams, both men's and women's, are very competitive, although they probably could win some more senior ICC trophies. But it is in a very strong position, and I think in terms of the way cricket's positioned, I think the commercial might is certainly coming from India at the moment.
There's a lot of business people here, and I might speak for them because they run very successful businesses. Is it a matter of strength that the Indian economy for cricket is as large as it is for the ICC, or is it a threat almost that one country is providing that much capital to the world sport?
Well, I think the sport has evolved over many years, and you've been following it for a long time, and it has transformed in a number of ways. I think probably when you and I started watching cricket, there was Test cricket, and that was it. So when we go to the Kotla and there's India and Australia playing in a Test match, it brings us back to where we started our love of the game from. Whereas in recent years, and not so recent at ODIs, but certainly in the last 20 years, the T20 cricket has evolved, and it has really transformed the game, and to a point though that it's more popular, more people viewing the game, more people attending the game, and probably more people making a living from the game than ever before.
Does it worry you that there's so many formats, or do you think it adds to the riches of our game that there is Test cricket, which is still wonderfully timeless? We have drinks, we have a tea break at tea. How many sports have a tea break at tea? And then we have the one-day game, which reaches its pinnacle at the World Cup later in India in October, and there's T20. What's the ICC's views on managing the three formats?
Well, I think the cricket's evolved, and all three formats still have a place in the game. I think the beauty of it is that cricket is played in different ways, it's watched in different ways, it's viewed in different ways depending on where you are in the world. And the other thing it can be do is scheduled in different ways. So you've got really strong business models based on Test cricket in England and Australia and India. In a lot of other countries, it's more about the shorter forms of the games, and they're the most popular. So what three formats does, it gives you the flexibility to construct or present cricket to your fan base in the best possible way to engage them. And I think that's where cricket's in a good place at the moment.
Football's always grappled with the club versus country situation. Football's always been a club sport first, and then occasionally they take a break to represent their country. So for a lot of people, Leo Messi was always Barcelona rather than Argentina, though you've got to tell him that he now speaks with a French accent. He's gone over. But cricket's just adapting. For a long time, country came first in cricket, and you're now starting to come to terms with the fact that there's some people who are saying, it's okay if I don't play for my country, I want to play for leagues. Now, as the custodian of country versus country cricket, how do you look at that situation developing?
Yeah, I think that, as we said before, the game is evolving, and when you see the strength of some of the 2020 leagues around the world, and the IPL is the obvious shining light in that regard, they serve a great purpose in that you can schedule cricket almost every night around different cities in a country at the same time, and still get a very good result, and still have more people engaging with the game. In terms of players, I think you're seeing more and more that some players are choosing to play in leagues And the way we grew up with the game, where you played for your state, you played for your country, and that was your chance to earn a living as a cricketer, I think that's changing, and probably for the better, because you're seeing a lot more employment opportunities for players all over the world through these various leagues. Now, we stage the World Cups, as you well know, and the competition, I think all players pride themselves on international competition. So certainly when it comes to World Cups, all the best players in the world want to play. And we're also having that impact with the World Test Championships. So the places in the final are up for grabs during this series. So at the moment there's a marriage between the domestic competitions and international cricket. The game is changing, but I think international cricket will be strong because there's so much national pride in the countries that have traditionally developed and promoted the sport, and particularly India.
The World Test Championship is an interesting one. Unless Australia spoil India's party, it'll be India versus Australia once again. After they finish playing 4 Test matches here, the teams just get onto a plane and go to England and play the final of the World Test Championship there. There's another area that the sport is growing enormously in, and we in India are very proud of what lies ahead as much as where we are, and that's the women's game. And the ICC pioneered it over the years. You've had 50-over World Cups, you've had 20-over World Cups. You Aussies are dominating it a little bit, but we'll catch up. But where do you see the women's game going? Because when the WPL came about, and then we saw the numbers, we thought, wow. And we've had a lot of outstanding women's sports people in India. But what's your thought on where the women's game is going to go?
Yeah, it's a really good question. And we're talking about opportunities for growing the sport, and I think the women's cricket is one of the best possible opportunities for us. And the recent developments in India with the Women's Premier League have been quite eye-watering in terms of the numbers that are being produced, the broadcast rights, the team ownership process that was undergone last week, the auction. If you could imagine being an English player or an Irish player getting ready for a World Cup match in Pal last week, while your name is being auctioned for hundreds of thousands of US dollars for 3 weeks of work. I mean, the transformation in the game has been enormous, and it probably goes back to 2017 when England and India fought out the World Cup final at Lords. And India's been very strong, and I think the timing of the establishment of the Women's Premier League is spot on. But the message to young girls all over the world, and particularly in cricket-playing countries, if you want a career as a professional athlete, cricket is the opportunity that's staring you in the face at the moment. And that's the exciting thing about trying to encourage young girls in all parts of the world to take up cricket.
You had to bring up 2017, which was fantastic for the ICC, but the heartbreak still exists. India were that close to winning that game. There's one other development that's a happy development that's taken place in our game. Our game was rocked by unsavory things, and then the anti-corruption unit came up, and I haven't heard a lot in the last 4 or 5 years. I'm not the kind to go searching for it. I don't like stings. But are you happy with the way the game is progressing on that front?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, you said you haven't heard much for 4 or 5 years, which is probably a very good sign. And we've got a department of people downstairs in our office in Dubai who I don't hear much from either, and that makes me very happy too, because it means that their job of educating players and participants in the game and disrupting any activity they become aware of is doing its job. And yes, you're right, it was 20 odd years ago that cricket was rocked by corruption scandals, and we've had an anti-corruption unit in place now for the best part of 20 years. So in terms of leading sport, in terms of monitoring this type of activity and making sure that fans, when they watch top-level sport, know that the players from both teams are trying their best to win, I think cricket's doing a good job of that at the moment. It doesn't mean there's not threats out there, and as you move down the cricket tree and look at some smaller leagues in the associate member countries, but people are looking for a weak point where people might be induced by offers. But our coverage goes all the way down, and they're aware of the networks that are trying to do that. So I think we've put into place a really good program for educating players, particularly because they're the front line, and also creating a disruption and a deterrent for potential corruptors.
There's a lot of countries that are now starting to play the game at a very good level. In recent times, we've seen the Dutch, we've seen Papua New Guinea do really well to qualify in 2021. We've seen Namibia do extraordinarily well. Some of the players from Namibia are now playing in leagues around the world. So the game is progressing very well around the world. Where next? I know the ICC has been thinking about the US for a long time. There's Major League Cricket happening there. What about the Olympics? There's been some talk about taking the sport to the Olympics.
Yes, you talk about the US market at the moment. I mean, we haven't really even scratched the surface in terms of cricket there, but it has a big fan base and a big profile. And people will probably be surprised, but the US market is our equal third biggest territory in terms of media rights, and that's before we've really started a professional cricket program there. Major League Cricket is another 2020 league which is going to commence in July this year there. We're going to be staging some matches for our T20 World Cup next year in the USA and in the Caribbean. So there's an opportunity for us to present elite cricket in the US market. And yes, we're in the process of campaigning to be included in the LA 2028 Olympic Games sports program. So discussions have been good. I think we would be a good addition to the games, and I think the Olympics would be very good for cricket in that in a number of the countries where cricket isn't so popular, it will raise the profile of the sport, and the cricket boards in those countries will get a seat at the big sporting table under the National Olympic Committees. So it's a big opportunity for us, and decision will be made later this year.
And now, can the Olympics take a 3.5-hour sport, or is T20 almost too long for an Olympic sport? Are we looking T10? Don't tell me you're looking T5. It'll sound like airport terminals now if we come down to T3 or...
No, it'll be T20.
Just as well it will be T20. We've got just a little bit of time left. Tell us about your expectations for the Cricket World Cup. When there's a Cricket World Cup in India, we just forget everything, and each team plays each other 9 times. There's a lot of games. Tell us about your expectations from the 50-over World Cup in India this October.
Yeah, I think the Cricket World Cup later this year, I mean, it has a history of, the men's version has a history of about almost 50 years, and it has been the greatest celebration of cricket, and it was our 4-yearly event. We've got, since T20 came into the mix, we've had World Cups in that format, but this is cricket's traditional World Cup. And no matter what happens in the lead up or in between, it dominates during the tournament itself. And if you go back to 2015 or the 2019 version in England, it engages cricket fans around the world. And more to the point, the research shows it attracts new fans. And people talk about one-day cricket a bit, but the World Cup is cricket's most dominant event in terms of attracting new fans, and it will be a huge success later this year.
Thank you very much, Geoff Allardice. You mentioned the 2019 World Cup. Who would have thought that a tournament played over a month and a half would end in a tie? They'd play a super over, that would end in a tie, and the world champion would be decided on a boundary count back. We have these quaint rules still in our game, but that's the way it ended. Geoff, thank you very much, and look forward to lots more ICC tournaments. There's a reasonable commentator if you want to hire him.
Thank you, Harsha. Thank you very much.
Cheers, Geoff. Thank you very much for joining. Cheers.
Thank you, gentlemen. Thank you very much. Thank you, Geoff. It's very nice of you to come here. I'm sorry we'll have to let you go, if only to inspire your mates out at the Firozshah Kotla. Harsha, I'm going to ambush this guy. I'm going to keep him here for a bit. Yesterday, when we were at the rehearsal, Harsha came up with a very interesting thought. And he talked about not the business of cricket, which I'm sure all of us are familiar with, but he talked about the business of leagues, which had me intrigued. And I would really be glad if, Harsha, you could share some of your thoughts with this
There are numbers.
very lightened audience.
There are numbers that
Please,
there are
that's
numbers
it.
when we
And by
talk.
the way, you have the best combination at the end of the day, which is cricket and Bollywood. Enjoy.
You can tell who's the cricket person and who's a showbiz person. Look at him. I'm just the cricket guy. You know, there are a lot of people in this room who understand large numbers much better than I do. I don't understand large numbers. So I actually wrote those down. And the numbers that we are talking about are just simply colossal. We are talking about cricket rights in leagues in the Indian market going for $6 billion. Now, when I was graduating in my second year at IIM Ahmedabad, we had a professor of economics who would wistfully look out through one of those lovely little holes that Louis Kahn had made over there and very wistfully say, I dream of the day we will have 1,000 crore company in India.
Absolutely. I mean, you know, I don't know if anybody could spell $1 billion in those days. I mean, it was a figure that was...
I still don't know how many zeros there are, but I know there's many. So that's $6 billion. And then we came up with the Women's League. And the Women's League has already done 4,669 crores for a Women's League that's not started. So there's obviously a lot of people investing in the leagues in India, partly because we've now started to get people identifying with leagues as much, if not greater, than identifying with countries. So if RCB lose an IPL final, the pain that takes place in Bengaluru is almost as much as when India lose a final. So the leagues are taking over the game, and it's interesting. You know, in our Hindu culture, or in our Indian culture, dare I say, we look after our children on the understanding that they will look after us later. So we are the only country in the world that still pays for the children's marriage, that still pays for children's education, because we know when we get older, they're going to look after us. The reason I'm telling you this, they will. Our society is strong. Marriages are beautiful. But the reason I'm bringing this up is we had the father figure, which was Test cricket. Test cricket told everybody what a beautiful game cricket is. It brought people into cricket. And then we started to have the children being born, which was the 50-over game and the 20-over game. And now the parents are getting older, and the children are starting to support them. And Test cricket is now being kept alive by this young child that is raking in the big money. And may it always be that way.
Absolutely, and yeah. Absolutely, which in a way reminds me of international football, because there was a comment you just said which was really interesting, that a lot of spectators are more affiliated and have far more passion with their clubs in football than with their countries. So I mean, there is this passion for, I suppose, your local team or the leagues that you say are so close to everybody's heart. And I think one of the most important things that you were talking about mainly was also that the kind of boost it has given to, along with women's cricket, along with the boost it has given to young people who can now, men and women alike, who can now take on a sport as a profession. And we're not just talking about, the creme de la creme, the people who own, several sort of crores for each tournament, which is good. But there are those who can now play cricket professionally and may not get those huge numbers, but they can still make a living out of it.
There are young boys and girls in India who are seeing numbers that their families don't recognize. And they're looking at these numbers, and these young boys and girls are saying, and it's amazing how many of them are saying it, when asked, what will you do with this money that you have now got? They're saying, I will buy a home for my parents.
How wonderful.
And this is something that you probably could not have said in an era gone by. There must be some people in this room who'd remember a time when players used to come by local train, get off at Churchgate, go to the Brabant Stadium to play a test match, then go back to Churchgate, get into train and go back home. And if the test match ended in 4 days, they only got paid for 4 days, so they didn't get the 50 rupees a day fee that they were getting afterwards. So from there to come to where we are, and Geoff mentioned the women's game. I was delighted that Geoff wanted to talk so much about the women's game. We've had a WPL auction. And there's 3 girls, 3 women, one from India, Smriti Mandana, one from England and one from Australia, who are now outside of the IPL among the top 10 earners in the cricket world. Among the top 10 earners in the cricket world, 3 of them are women.
Wonderful, yeah,
outside
absolutely.
Of the IPL.
It's good. Deserve a round of applause.
That's outside of the IPL, though, because the IPL is a different beast completely. But if you had told me that would happen 5 years ago, I would not have believed it. And I wonder if that is a reflection, and I'm not qualified to talk about that, if that's a reflection of the strength of the Indian economy.
It is, and in fact, you talk about cricket, which of course is amongst the sports that we play in India, it is by far the most lucrative, if I may use that word. However, I can remember this while I was growing up, which was said about the Indian hockey team as well. Everybody took a lot of glory, and there was a lot of sympathy for players who we heard had to not just travel by train, but they had to play in the Olympics and other big tournaments barefoot. And there were all these horror stories about them not getting equipment and not getting proper accommodation and all the rest of it. I don't want to go into that now, but fortunately that was somewhere in the past, in the dark ages. And today, what do you feel should or could be the role of the BCCI to support some of the other sports in India?
It's an interesting thought, because the BCCI is not short of funds, and I think sometime about 3 or 4 years ago there was a suggestion made to support other sport as well. But my firm belief is that sport will come through, much like every other enterprise, when there is private sector involvement in it, when there is the entrepreneurial drive that so characterizes New India. I do a lot of corporate events. I go around and I see the entrepreneurial fervor in New India like I've never seen before. And I think if we can get them to invest in the new leagues, maybe it's not for me to say where the BCCI money should go, but that would be one way up. There's some interesting things happening. I mean, all of us as children played kabaddi.
I'm sorry?
All of us as children played kabaddi.
Yes, absolutely.
And kabaddi players are now earning a living playing kabaddi. There's a volleyball league that's taken off at the moment, and I saw a little bit of it yesterday, and the drama, the attention was fantastic. You see what happens in badminton when Sindhu's playing. Saina was the pioneer. When Sindhu's playing, the country stops when Sindhu played the Olympic silver medal game. So there is a great appetite for sport in India. And the best thing is that the new generation that's coming through, India under 30, India under 35, pick a number, is a multi-sport generation. They watch football, they love Formula One, they love cars, they love kabaddi, they love hockey, they love everything.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting, kabaddi, because you really don't need much of an investment. You need a pair of short pants and a
kabaddi because you were in show business. People like us.
I am a little past the stage of playing kabaddi, but I used to play kabaddi. Not very well, but I did give it a go.
But sport is not necessarily about being a champion. Sport is just about playing it.
No, I completely agree with you. I was never a champion. So, I mean, I absolutely love that slogan.
I wasn't either.
It's all about participating. It's not about winning. I mean, that's a great slogan, and it works completely.
But Dalip, I'll tell you what else these leagues are doing. These leagues are lifting families. And there are families where people used to tell children, you cannot play sport anymore because that is all I can afford. And today, the same families are telling children, go and play sport, because if you crack it big, then the world is your oyster. But in Indian cricket, there are at least 50 or 60 stories in the last few years where families have just got lifted completely. Earlier, 15, 16, 18 people could play the game at the highest level. That is what the business of leagues is doing, the difference between playing for a league and playing for the country. When cricket was all about, or hockey or football for that matter, was all about playing sport for the country, you could have 15, 16, 18, at best 20 people maybe playing it. Absolutely. Now ambition has spread, and 150 can dream of playing at a very high level. And each of these 150 are now making a decent sum. It comes with frustrations, it comes with other issues as well, but it's just lifting families like I have never seen before. And we're all Indians, finally, slightly soppy, sentimental people, but you'll be drawn to tears by some of the stories that you read. Overseas players, on hearing their price, have stopped their cars and cried. Because from where they were to where they are going is where these leagues have taken us, and and the difference was just unimaginable.
Absolutely, yes, you're absolutely right. I mean, the kind of people who are now included into the sports arena, as it were, so that they can make a living, whether it is kabaddi or whether it is hockey or anything.
I mean, even in the
it's absolutely phenomenal. I mean, in my time, there was never a question of it. I mean, if you went out to pursue the sport that you were playing, I mean, your parents told you to stop and come home and study. Today, fathers and uncles and people are taking their children specifically and specially to go to the sports grounds and to become champions, which is such a huge, it's a sea change from the times that, well, certainly me, I don't know, you're much younger than I am.
The expression "in my time" is a very tricky one, so I was waiting to see where you were headed with that, because it tells us about how far back we go. But isn't it interesting that there's a girl from Sangli, I think, who's got a 3.5 crore contract. There's a girl who used to play hockey in Bandra who's got a 2.5 crore contract. There's an outstanding woman cricketer from a place called Moga in Punjab. And there's young girls today who want to be like this girl from Moga. Her name is Harmanpreet. So there's young girls who want to be like these. There's under 19 girls who are so contemporary. And I would genuinely hope that more and more women start to play this sport. And not just this sport, but everywhere else. You see the medals that our women are bringing in sports like wrestling and boxing. I mean, Mary Kom is a legend. I once met Mary Kom and I was just starstruck. So there's sport available, there's so many opportunities available with the women, and I hope that happens. I hope we become a multi-sport nation. And that's why I'm so excited about this young generation, because they're all multi-sport.
Absolutely. And actually, the world over, if you look at it, even if you take baseball and you take a lot of American sport and football, I mean, a lot of the greatest footballers in this planet are from very, very modest backgrounds. And they are superstars today. I mean, without taking names, I know you all know about it. So, I mean, I think this kind of a sort of a picture is very clearly emerging that India is now, for sure, in that very special league where they can afford their youngsters who may not have all the privileges to be able to come and play sport at the highest level.
Yeah, but since this is a global business summit, India is the epicenter. But let me tell you what's happening in a lot of countries around the world. Geoff briefly referred to that. But more and more countries now want to play the shorter form of the game. And more countries are now dependent on the leagues to finance them. Luckily, Geoff is now sitting on a $3.1 billion ICC rights money, so every country gets a little bit more. But in the West Indies, some of their best players are not playing for the West Indies anymore. There's leagues starting in the US. South Africa, which is such a great test match country, are only playing 2 test series because they needed to make space for the league to set up to come up in South Africa. And at the same time, there was a South African T20 league going on across Cape Town and Durban and Johannesburg, across Dubai, Sharjah. There was an Emirates League ILT20 going on, across the sporting capital of the world in Australia. There was a Big Bash going on. Up in Dhaka and Sylhet and Chattogram, there was the Bangladesh Premier League going on. And all these were going on at the same time. There's a Pakistan Super League that's just started.
And I'm sure you'll agree with me when I say that actually the pioneer of all this, the revolutionary as it were, was Kerry Packer. I mean, many, many moons ago, he just turned everything on its head. He decided that people are going to play in colored clothes. He had a wonderful slogan which said, "Big boys play at night," which was very exciting for everybody. And
there were more. I was just afraid you might go into those. There were more.
And everybody sort of left their country teams and went charging all the way to Australia, because suddenly cricket became a place where you could afford a good living.
It's a question of valuation, I think. Valuation is a word that a lot of people use, but people like me don't understand, because valuations seem to be soaring. But what is the valuation of a player? And what the leagues are doing by putting the players out in an open market situation is the leagues are allowing the players to find a value for themselves. And they're valuing the players differently. The captain of South Africa cannot get a place in the franchise league, for example. Or the captain of a country may not get the same price because somebody else is valued at a higher price. So we are getting into a situation now where the market is determining the value of a player.
And
that is something we would never have imagined in the days gone by.
I'm sorry to interrupt you, but also the thing now is that, you know, it is so difficult to be playing for your country, which is just about 12 or 15 or 20 people out of a nation of 1.3 billion. So now a cricketer who's good can say that, well, you know, even if I don't make it to the Indian team, I still can make a living out of this because I play for the leagues and I play the game that I love, and it affords me a livelihood. And as you quite rightly said, it also helps the families, and you know, is a general part of growth.
And sport is bringing countries together. We're having a Border Gavaskar Trophy taking place at the moment at the Arun Jaitley Stadium, up what is called the Kotla till recently. It was a series that began as an initiative of the Australia-India Trade Council. The Australia-India Trade Council said, how do we bring our countries together? What links Australia and India more than anything else? It's not fair that all that the Australians know about India is cricket and a little bit more. All that Indians know about Australia is kangaroos and Bradman. We need to do a little bit more. And the Australia-India Trade Council set up a tournament that is now vibrant. I'm not saying it led to a free trade agreement between India and Australia, but it's led to a lot of togetherness. The countries are coming closer together, and maybe sport can act as a bridge. Maybe sport can act as a bridge between our countries.
It has. It has been it's been a cultural ambassador. I'm getting signals from there. Never give an actor and a commentator the microphone. They will not shut up.
But
sorry about that.
You are a scripted person. I go live television, and I'm seeing I'm seeing the timer there.
God,
and I'm trained to end on 2.
Harsha, stop playing holier than thou. You use a teleprompter as well. We all use teleprompters.
No, I'm just looking at the timer there. I was looking at the timer.
Thank you so much, Harsha. And thank you all so much for being here with us. I thank you very much. And I thank the Times of India and the group in the Economic Times for giving us this platform. Thank you. And thank you, Harsha.
Thank you, Dalip.
Bye.
Been a big admirer of Dalip, the stage actor, for many years. So it's been wonderful sharing the stage with him.
They put the mic off and I sit it. I think we'll have to sort of move ahead. The time has come now where we will be welcoming the Honourable Prime Minister of India. And there is a protocol, ladies and gentlemen, which I've been requested to inform you about. And that is that for a few minutes, and not for too much longer, we will have to maintain complete silence. I would request anyone in the hall not to be moving around or leaving the hall. And obviously, I think by now we all know that our mobile phones are off. And we'll have to spend a few minutes in silence, which should